Agape, or Christian love. The Gospel according to St. John opens as follows. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. In him was life. Excuse me, I fucked up already. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Got to study that line again. That's quite a bestseller, that St. John Bible. Let's read it again. The Gospel according to St. John opens as follows. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. This might seem to be another expression of the eternal and relentless dualism according to which terrestrial night and transcendent day are irrevocably hostile to one another. But no, the Gospel continues. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The incarnation of the Word in the world and of light in darkness is the astounding event whereby we are delivered from the woe of being alive. And this event, in being the center of the whole of Christianity, is the focus of that Christian love which is Scripture, which in Scripture is called agape. I'm going to read that whole thing again. Agape, or Christian love. The Gospel according to St. John opens as follows. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. End of quote. This might seem to be another expression of the eternal and relentless dualism according to which terrestrial night and transcendent day are irrevocably hostile to one another. But no, the Gospel continues. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The incarnation of the world in the world and of light in darkness is the astounding event whereby we are delivered from the woe of being alive. And this event, in being the center of the whole of Christianity, is the focus of that Christian love which in Scripture is called agape. The event is unique and not to be believed naturally. Naturally is in quotes. The event is unique and not to be believed, quote, naturally, end of quote. That the incarnation occurred is the radical negation of every kind of religion. The ultimate offense, not only to our reason, which is unable to countenance the absurd running together of the infinite and the finite, but also and especially to any natural religious disposition. Every known religion tends to sublimate man and culminates in condemning his finite life. Our desires are intensified and sublimated by the god Eros through being embraced in a single desire whereby they are abolished. The final goal of the process is to attain what is not life. The death of the body. Night and day being incompatible and men being deemed creatures of night, men can only achieve salvation by ceasing to be, by being lost in the bosom of the divine. But in Christianity, thanks to its dogma of the incarnation of the Christ in Jesus, this process is completely inverted. Death, from being the last term, is become the first condition. What the gospel calls dying to self is the beginning of a new life already here below. Not the soul's flight out of the world, but its return in force into the midst of the world. It is an immediate recreation, a reassertion of life, not of course of the old life and not of an ideal life, but of our present life now repossessed by the Spirit. God, the real God, has been made man, a real man. Darkness as comprehended. The light in the person of Jesus Christ. And every man born of woman who believes this is born again of the Spirit here and now. Dead to himself and dead to the world insofar as self and the world are sinful. But restored to himself and to the world insofar as the Spirit wants to save them. Thereupon to love is no longer to flee and persistently to reject the act of love. Love now still begins beyond death, but from that beyond it returns to life. From the beginning again. Thereupon, to love is no longer to flee and persistently to reject the act of love. Love now still begins beyond death, but from that beyond it returns to life. And in being thus converted, love brings forth our neighbor. Eros had treated a fellow creature as but an illusory excuse and occasion for taking fire. And forthwith this creature had to be given up. For the intention was ever to burn more fiercely, to burn to death. Individual beings were but so many defects and eclipsings of the one and only being, and as such none was susceptible of being really loved. Salvation lay hereafter, and a religious-minded person forsook the creatures from whom his God had turned away. But the Christian God has not forsaken us. He alone among all gods known to us has not turned away. Quite the contrary. He first loved us as we are and with our limitations, and these he even went so far as to put on, making himself as one of us. and thus putting on, though without sin and without self-division, the garment of sinful and manifold men, the love of God has opened an entirely new way to us, the way of holiness. And the way is the contrary of the sublimation that had been an illusory flight out of the concreteness of life. To love according to this new way is a positive act and an act of transformation. Eros had pursued infinite becoming. Christian love is obedience in the present. For to love God is to obey God, who has commanded us to love one another. To love your enemies is to shed selfishness and the desirous and anxious self. It means the death of the solitary human being, but it also means the birth of our neighbor. In reply to the ironical question, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answered, "Whoever has need of you." From that moment, every human relation has given a new direction and being given a new meaning. I'm going to read that last few sentences again. Christian love is obedience in the present. For to love God is to obey God, who has commanded us to love one another. To love your enemies is to shed selfishness and the desirous and anxious self. It means the death of the solitary human being, but it also means the birth of our neighbor. In reply to the ironical question, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answered, "Whoever has need of you." From that moment, every human relation has been given a new direction and being given a new meaning. The symbol of love is no longer the infinite passion of a soul. The symbol of love is no longer the infinite passion of a soul in quest of light, but the marriage of Christ and the church. And in this way, human love itself has been transformed, whereas according to the doctrines of mystical paganism, human love was sublimated so thoroughly as to be made into a god even while it was being dedicated to death. Christianity has restored human love to its proper status, and in this status has hallowed it by means of marriage. Such a love, being understood according to the image of Christ's love for his church, Ephesians verse 25, is able to be truly mutual, for its object, from having been the actual notion of love and the exquisite and fatal branding of love, it is better, St. Paul says, to marry than to burn, has become the other as he or she really is, and in spite of the hindrance of sin, human love is a happy love, since already here below it can be obedience. It can by obedience attain to the fullness of its own status. When pursued to its logical extreme, the dualism of night and day had resulted from the standpoint of life and the ultimate misfortune, death. Christianity is a fatal misfortune only for the man who is parted from God. But it is a newly creative and blessed misfortune already in this life. Christianity is a fatal misfortune only for the man who is parted from God, but it is a newly creative and blessed misfortune already in this life for the believer who takes the cup of salvation.